Hello, everybody. Welcome to this event. My name is Anja Beer. I'll be your technical host through this event today. And before we start the program, allow me to say a few words about WebEx and about your interaction opportunities here today. We are in a WebEx meeting. This means you can all join in with video and audio. You are also welcome to leave your camera on the whole time. On the other hand, please only open your microphone when you want to say something. This way, we want to avoid some disturbing background noises. If you have a question or a comment during the whole event, you can always leave us a message or a question in the chat. You find the chat in the menu bar in the bottom line on the very right side. The moderator will see your questions and comments and brings them into the discussion. I must point out that we will be recording the whole event. If you do not wish to be recognized, please turn off your camera. If you have any problems or technical questions during the event, feel free to contact the technical support or drop us a message in the chat. If for some reason you get kicked out of the event, you can always log back in using the link we sent you before. So we're finally ready to go. I wish you interesting insights and have a good time.
Hello, everybody. My name is Monika Griefahn. I'm your host today beside Anja. And I'm happy that you are here and want to discuss with us how international cooperation can really reduce the climate problem. We are the eFuel Alliance. The eFuel Alliance exists out of about 170 members, and we have members along the production chain of anything which has to do with fuel, but also of consumer organizations, like, for instance, in Germany, the ADAC. But we have also members in Chile, in Brazil, in Italy, in Japan. So we're trying really to work international. And today, we really want to show that the climate crisis can only be really worked on as in international cooperation. And e-fuels are a very important part of it. And I hear in Germany all the time, but e-fuels are not efficient, but they are efficient in a lot of other countries. And this is good for those countries. They can do something, they can export something, they can have really a benefit out of it. And it's good for us because we get fuel, which we can import, because we cannot produce within the European Union or within Germany our fuel and all the renewable energy ourselves to, on one hand, have the whole production transformed into climate neutral production, all the transport transformed into climate neutral production, and everything which has to be done into climate neutral. So we can only do this by international cooperation. And that's why we have today very interesting speakers which explain a little bit how international cooperation can be. And at the end, you might understand how we can really work together and how green energy can create jobs, generate added values in producing countries, and offer climate neutral solutions. We need e-fuels to do that, and it goes much more quicker than as it would go if you had only electromobility and only hydrogen for the industry. So we need everything. We need technology to be technology open, and we have to work on all the sources we have in the world, either biomass, which is renewable, but also e-fuels made out of hydrogen together with CO2 out of the atmosphere. So I'm looking forward to a very interesting afternoon, and I hope you will also have that. And I pass on now to Ralf Diemer, who will explain a little bit more. Thank you very much, and for a nice afternoon.
Yeah, thank you very much, Monika. Also a warm welcome from me. I'm your moderator today. I'm the Managing Director of the eFuel Alliance, and we're just about to pass 180 participants. Actually a very international audience, and that fits perfect to our subject today, because we really want to dive into the very question of what e-fuels actually mean in terms of global scale. Therefore, we have a very distinguished bunch of speakers coming from Namibia, from South Africa, from Chile, but also from Germany, and also a lot of them, including myself, actually from the nice part of Germany of Baden-Württemberg, which of course I appreciate very much. So let's dive into, if you want to ask any questions in between, please use the chat. We will monitor the chat and we will try to forward all your questions you have. And for our first speaker, for our first slot, so to speak, I would very much welcome Tanja Gönner. Tanja Gönner is since 2012 the chair of the management board of the GIZ, in German the Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit. So she very much is in charge for international affairs in terms of development, and also in terms of economical development of countries around the world. I know Tanja from our past, actually from Baden-Württemberg, because she started her career in Baden-Württemberg as a politician. She was member of the German parliament as well as member of the state parliament of Baden-Württemberg, and she was for several years in several functions member of the government of Baden-Württemberg before she 2012 changed to the GIZ. Tanja Gönner will talk about hydrogen and e-fuels, opportunities for a new partnership between North and South, ? And with that subject, I leave you to it, and Tanja, to you the floor. Welcome very much here in our audience, Tanja.
Thank you so much, Ralf. Dear Monika Griffan, dear panelists and participants, thank you very much for the invitation, and also for the very warm welcome, and congratulations to you for this event. I feel honored to present the keynote speech on this important topic. In the last 2 years at GIZ, we have been working intensively on hydrogen and hydrogen-derived products, the so-called Power-to-X products. The dynamic development in this market will provide new opportunities to our partner countries. And if I mention to our partner countries, the GIZ is normally working in the field of international cooperation, mostly with developing countries. So if I talk with from partner countries, these are mostly partner countries especially in developing countries, to say that, so it's clear for you what I mean if I talk about partner countries. At the same time, H2PTX will support the worldwide endeavor to tackle climate change, as Monika Griffin was mentioned before. Climate change has started to show its dramatic impacts on our lives. it has become clear that we have to act fast and efficient to fight climate changes. In this presentation, I would first like to present the rationale for striving to use hydrogen and PTX in Germany and abroad. Then I would like to highlight motivations and potentials of partner countries and how partnership between producers and consumers of H2 and PTX should be designed. This topic then will be followed by an overview of the most attractive use cases of hydrogen. Then we will come to a short look at different ways to decarbonizing vehicles. The next aspect will be a look at the most prominent sustainability issues. And finally, I will conclude with some typical GIZ actions. I will have the time a little bit in view. Hopefully, I am able to do it in the given time. And these actions are especially for our partner countries to benefit from the H2 PTX production and to avoid social and environment problems. So let me first start with some general remarks on the importance of H2 and PTX imports. For decarbonization in Germany, as planned by the federal government by 2045, imports of approximately 50 to 80% of the total H2 PTX demand projected for 2045 in Germany are required. And I will say it's not only Germany, it is the European Union. This demand will have to be met partly from Europe and mostly from partner countries outside Europe, as H2 PTX demand will grow in other EU countries too. Overall, there are probably not enough suitable locations available in the European Union to satisfy the European Union-wide H2 PTX demand. Where will these imports come from? Well, some people say that suitable industrial countries such as Saudi Arabia and Australia have enough desert area to produce big quantities of H2 and PTX. It is certainly true that these countries will play an important role. Beyond that, we consider some of the most promising candidates for H2 PTX exports to be developing countries. We think that production sites in such partner countries provide these nations ample opportunities to become H2 PTX exporters for several reasons. First, the global demand for H2 PTX will be enormous. It is very likely that a lot of market players will look for chances in every corner of the world. Second, huge areas of land will need to be covered with wind and PV plants in rather short times. This will automatically lead to investment in diverse locations. Third, we don't really know, as of now, what the decisive factors for market success of different locations countries will be. Investors will try out a lot of combinations of H2 products and production sites, etc. Lastly, diversity of H2 PTX sources from different origins is important for security of supply. GIZ partner countries such as Brazil, North African countries, South Africa and Chile offer the best conditions for competitive H2 PTX products due to their potential for low-cost renewable energies and, in the case of North Africa, have competitive advantages due to geographically proximity and better transport possibilities to the demand markets in Europe. Countries such as Chile and South Africa, which are geographically more distant from markets in industrialized countries, will also focus on the production of PTX products such as eFuels and ammonia due to comparatively high transport costs of H2. Partnerships can only be successful in the long term if both sides benefit. Now, how can we achieve hydrogen partnerships on equal terms with developing countries? The different political agendas and needs in the partner countries must be considered. The countries do not see themselves as mere energy suppliers, but want to promote their own socio-economic development through H2 PTX exports. More precisely, value and job creation should take place locally and local know-how should be developed. The existing industry should be involved and contribute to the H2 PTX growth in the respective country. The public finances should benefit through tax revenues. Undesired social and ecological consequences should be avoided. Several partner countries strive for the establishment of green hydrogen industries. They view hydrogen as a possible driver of economic development and structural transition. The prospect of attracting industries that require large quantities of hydrogen and ultimately developing from a supplier of raw materials into a production hub for high-value goods also makes the establishment of hydrogen production facilities appealing. For many countries, improving the trade balance and balance of payments is a top political and strategic objective. To this end, GIZ, on behalf of the German government, supports partner countries like Brazil, South Africa, Morocco, and Tunisia in developing national hydrogen strategies and regulations that maximize national benefits. In several multilateral projects, we also work on behalf of different federal ministries on conducive frameworks for hydrogen, such as social and environmental aspects, identification of business cases, research cooperation, and capacity building. After having stressed some aspects of motivation and investing in hydrogen and country strategies, I want now to continue with the use cases of H2 and PTX. Hydrogen is the trillion US dollar challenge. To meet the global challenge by reducing CO2 emissions to net zero, we must shift fossil markets to renewable energy markets. That means oil, gas, and coal must be replaced by wind, solar, and hydropower, as well as biomass energy. The world market for oil has a volume of roughly 1 trillion US dollar per year. To achieve this replacement of fossil fuels, a massive scale-up of renewable electricity production is required. For example, decarbonization studies for Germany show that the installed renewable energy capacity in Germany needs to grow by a factor of 4 to 6. On a global perspective, this is an even more ambitious venture. One key priority is therefore to focus on the very efficient use of energy. Another key priority is the shift to direct use of electricity in sectors formerly supplied by oil, gas, and coal, the so-called sector coupling. Prominent examples are ammonia production, mainly for fertilizers, where hydrogen is a required input for the synthesis process. Look at the steel production. The production of iron from iron ore requires a chemical reaction that traditionally uses coal, which can be replaced by hydrogen. Look at the aviation. Synthetic e-kerosene is the most likely alternative fuel for long-haul flights in the future. Shipping ammonia and methanol are the most likely alternative fuels for seagoing maritime transport. Long-term electricity storage, countries with considerable seasonal fluctuations of renewable energy generation could rely on hydrogen as storage medium. And in the next part of my presentation, I would like to go into some details on the efficiencies of H2 and e-fuels in vehicles. For road transports, e-fuels are hardly seen as an option anymore. The reason is the low energetic efficiency. With 25 kilowatt hours of renewable electricity, an average battery electric car can travel approximately 100 kilometers, including all losses. A hydrogen-powered car can travel approximately 35 kilometers due to losses of approximately 30% in electrolysis, of approximately 25% in storage, transport and distribution of hydrogen, and another 50% in the fuel cell. And a car with a traditional combustion engine using e-fuels could travel approximately 15 kilometers due to losses of approximately 30% in electrolysis, approximately 35% in fuel synthesis, inclusive carbon supply, and a further 70% in the combustion engine. Some people argue that lower efficiencies don't matter that much because they are partly compensated by much higher yields of PV and wind farms at premium sites due to better wind and solar conditions. This is correct to a certain extent. In the long run, once abundant renewable energy capacities are installed, the efficiency of CO2 neutral fuels might not be the most important criteria anymore. However, we are convinced that every kilowatt hour of renewable electricity will be needed in the next 10 to 20 years to replace fossil fuels and to fight climate change. There will be a limit to the acceleration of worldwide renewable energy installation. My conclusion is that e-fuels are very important elements in the worldwide decarbonization strategy. For efficiency and cost reasons, they should be mainly used to decarbonize this point where we don't have other chances. Why is it much more complex to produce e-fuels compared to hydrogen or ammonia? The main additional complexity is the additional need to provide carbon from sustainable sources. Let me explain why we say availability of sustainability produced carbon as a challenge. While the technology for the production of hydrogen, as well as for the conversion to PTX products, such as e-fuels, are available on the market, we consider the provision of carbon as the second important ingredient for the production of any e-fuel as the most challenging part. It is rather easy to extract CO2 from exhaust gases of any fossil combustion process, but the technology is not a mass product yet. To produce sustainable PTX products, the CO2 used in the process must remain in a closed carbon cycle. This means using renewable carbon from biogenic or atmospheric sources with negative impacts such as land use. Sustainable options for the provision of carbon in a future net zero carbon emission world are limited. Unavoidable CO2 emissions from chemical reactions in cement production, CO2 emissions from biomass or biomass-based processes, for example, the pulp and paper industry. However, the total potential of sustainable biomass is limited and might not be sufficient to provide the required amount of CO2. Direct air capture, extraction of a CO2 from the ambient air. This process is considered to be the most ambitious approach. However, the problem is that DAC is not available on an industrial scale. So far, the cost and the energy need for DAC are enormous. Let me continue with a core topic of GIZ, the sustainability. For the partner countries and for Germany as a potential importing country, the establishment of green hydrogen production facility is only expedient if ambitious sustainability criteria are met. The development of internationally recognized sustainability standards covering all aspects of sustainability and, building on this, the certification of hydrogen and its downstream products open opportunities to steer demand specifically towards sustainable products. Regulatory frameworks such as European directives, for example, the Renewable Energy Directive 2, as well as regulations established by the organizations which are in charge of the international aviation and shipping sector, can serve as points of departure in this respect. Different organizations are currently drawing up sustainability criteria for the production of green hydrogen. GIZ supports these activities as part of its various projects, especially for the PTX hub. We suggest a framework which encompasses 4 basic dimensions: economic, environmental, social, and governance. First, the economic perspective. The production, use, and trade of H2 PTX products should contribute to creating added value and stimulating growth in income and employment. Public finance will be affected in many ways, through revenues from taxes and trade, as well as expenses for infrastructure investment. support for renewable and H2 PTX, or by assistance for efforts ensuring a just transition. Assessing the economic dimension also requires a look at infrastructural and logistical needs. Second, checking the environmental footprint of H2 PTX is essential for any sustainability assessment. The electricity used in electrolysis, synthesis, and refinement processes should stem from renewable sources. The high levels of electricity required for hydrogen production present both opportunities and risks. In order that a new, yet to be established green hydrogen industry integrates smoothly into the existing system, it is important that it does not stand in competition to the green energy supply in the country. From a climate policy perspective, hydrogen production on an industrial scale is only feasible where renewable energy actually generates surplus power, or if additional renewable energy capacity is developed specifically for the production of hydrogen. The establishment of an export market for H2 PTX can, in the best case, contribute to raising ambitions for the expansion of renewable energies in the partner countries. Another key aspect is to ensure the already mentioned closed carbon cycle of PTX production and use. Carbon has to be provided from either direct air capture biogenic sources or cement production. Hydrogen and PTX production must also go hand in hand with sound management of biodiversity and water consumption, especially in areas with water scarcity. Comprehensive land use planning is of very high relevance, as large areas will be needed to produce marketable quantities of H2 PTX products. I want to give you an idea why this issue is of singular importance. For example, why does it take to produce 100,000 liters of synocosins every day? What is the quantity needed for a daily long distance, one flight, for example, from Frankfurt to Hong Kong? This production capacity requires the electricity of solar power plant of approximately 400 megawatt. That corresponds to a surface area of almost 10 square kilometers in very good solar condition, which can be found, for example, in North Africa. Some early stage hydrogen projects have reserved surface areas in the order of 1,000 square kilometers per project. Hence, land use planning and land allocation processes are extremely important to avoid or minimize conflict, social problems, and environmental damage. In addition, resource requirements, such as the amounts of critical rare raw materials needed and their recycling, must be analyzed. Furthermore, pollution and safety risks of hydrogen and PTX production, storage, transportation, and use must be carefully screened. Third, the social and societal impacts. H2 PTX technologies promise additional jobs, yet energy transition may also result in job losses in fossil energy and related sectors. Capacity building and trainings that focus on new skill requirements must be deployed to ensure a just transition. Ensuring respect to human rights and of the ILO core labor standards, not only in the first tier, but along the entire value chain, is non-negotiable. Health and safety risk of H2 PTX production, transport and use
Dass sich
must
Leute
be
nach draußen trauen, die so ein Englisch sprechen, das ist schon der Knaller.
monitored and avoided.
Maybe you could mute yourself, please. Of course, not Tanya.
Yeah, I understand. I understand. Ensuring respect of human rights and for the ILO core labor standards, not only in the first tier, but along the entire value chain, is non-negotiable. Health and safety risk of H2 PTX production, transport and use must be monitored and avoided. Furthermore, it is essential that H2 PTX production does not negatively affect people's access to energy or resources like water and land. On the contrary, PTX projects could include new installations of renewable power capacity or desalination plants, which might even generate co-benefits and thereby create win-win opportunities. Fourth and lastly, governance concerns are relevant for both public administration and corporate business conduct. For domestic and international investment decisions, political stability, the rule of law, and regulatory quality are essential parameters. Transparency is key to avoid and fight bribery and corruption. The commitment to climate protection should be reflected in coherent national policies, such as the national determined contribution to the Paris Agreement. Only if all relevant stakeholders are not only informed and involved, but actively engaged and empowered, will the transition to an energy system based on renewables and H2PTX result in a strengthened and sustainable economy and society. As GIZ, we ensure in our work with our partners that all sustainability dimensions are taken into account when designing consistent and coherent policies and regulations for the development of H2PTX economies. Allow me to conclude my presentation with some final remarks on the contribution of GIZ in supporting partner countries on their way to H2PTX economies. First, developing strategies. We advise partner countries both on decision-making and on the concrete elaboration of strategies and policy frameworks for sustainable, climate-friendly hydrogen production and use. Second, setting ambitious sustainability standards. We advise developing countries and emerging economies on holistic frameworks for sustainable production of hydrogen and PTX. In particular, we advise on standards and certification for import into the EU and for participation in H2 global auctions. Third, adding value for the partner countries. We support the development of local technical know-how and in some cases also of applied research, technology transfer and partnership between German, European and local companies as well as research institutions can also be an important contribution. Fourth, pursuing of differentiated approach. In the early phase of market ramp up, we support the development of H2PTX economies. Only in the most suitable locations worldwide, for example, in countries with large areas with excellent solar wind conditions without land use conflicts. In second best suited countries, we focus on preparing for the hydrogen market by massive expansion of renewables and increasing energy efficiency as the backbone, as well as exploring H2PTX potential and transformation pathways via long-term energy system modeling Vision 100 consulting. However, all these beautiful ideas can only be put into practice if, on the one hand, a financially solvent demand is created by the market itself and is supported by regulations and funding instruments. On the other hand, conducive conditions must be created on the ground by supporting the partner countries. To this end, 4 bilateral projects have already started in Brazil, South Africa, Tunisia, and Chile. Others must follow. In a nutshell, based on long-standing and trusting cooperation with partner countries, we can and will, on behalf of the German government, actively contribute to ensuring that the population in the Global South benefits from the export to H2PTX in their social and economic development. This is a precondition for a successful new hydrogen and eFuels partnership between North and South. We look forward to addressing the presented challenges and opportunities for global sustainable development together with partners who share our values. And so thank you very much for your attention. Sorry that I don't have a presentation, and I know it's not easy to follow such a long speech. I'm sorry for that, and I'm probably sure that we will be able to send the presentation or the speech to you afterwards, so you can read it again. And thank you so much for your attention.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tanja. Due to the fact that you spoke very clear and slow, I think you was understood very well. I can see that on two other points here. Since you started your speech, we gained 60 more participants. So welcome to all of them. We are 241 people in the call now. And we have a lot of questions. And I would like to pass them part by part over to you, if you allow me, because we have some time left for questions. Of course, maybe there are some questions too specific right now, but I think if that is the case, then we will find a way to pass answers later or after the event. So I will start with the last question, which came from Jean-Baptiste Jarin. And the question is, how do we make sure that the green electricity we will require for eFuels, for example, H2 or DAC, will not harm countries' decarbonization strategies, for example, closing coal and gas electricity generation plants? Who will track and validate the sustainability of the projects, making sure we remain below the 28 grams CO2 per megajoule? That would be the first question.
So thank you so much. Very specific question. First of all, I think, and I try to do it in the speech. First of all, for us, it's clear that if we work together with the partner countries, it should be clear that the production of hydrogen for export should not push back the own ambitions of the countries for their access to energy and also for their decarbonization. It has to go hand in hand, because without that, it could not be, on one hand, sustainable, and on the other hand, really successful. And that's what we try to advise the governments. Normally we work together with the governments, and that's what we try to advise if they think about their own strategies and plans, how to do that. And there we try to support them to get a better understanding of that and really to look at that point.
Thank you very much. Maybe I can add one a little broader question, coming back to one of your points in your speech concerning the energy efficiency question. Of course, this is one of the core debates I think we have in Europe right now about the question, basically, should the regulator, so to speak, regulate which products are to be used for which use cases? Or should we try to find a more market-based open approach, saying as long as we do not have the industrial production of e-fuels of any kind, we should use any possible leverage, including road transport, to upscale production in the first place. And there is also the question and that is also then the question, of course, should it be up then to the respective countries, of course, what exactly they produce in their and what is their use for their investments. And there is also an additional question on that issue from my colleague Christian Schulze from Mazda, who simply asked, due to the fact that also when we talk from a global perspective, for example, we have a colleague from Chile in our call later on. Chile, of course, is very far away. And then, of course, if you want to transport energy, renewable energy from Chile to Europe, for example, of course, you cannot do that in any mode. You need, for example, preferably liquid modes, which then, of course, can be fuel, for example, and shouldn't that be taken into account also much more in our discussion in Europe?
Well, thank you so much. I fully agree. It's a much broader question, but it contains all, I will say, all questions we have at that point in, I will say, the community discussing about how to scale up industries, what are the questions to answer. And I think there are mainly two different lines. The one who said, let us start and not waiting for a market, not thinking about a market design, but use it for everything. And the other is we need a market design because we have to have in mind the sustainability. And if it really pays on the decarbonization, we have to have clear, as I mentioned before in my input, what's the most efficient use. And I'm pretty sure we will not be able to solve that different views because we are right on a stage or on a time where I understand both sides. It's clear where we as development agency stands, but I can understand that others let us start and try to get in action. What I can see is that especially the German government tried to really bring in all know-how on one hand for how to set a framework for regulation with the H2 Global, not only to support partner countries to start projects, but also to think how could be a market solution be set up. How could it function? Learning from renewable energy, from the beginning of the renewable energy, the different ideas behind that, the different approaches there, and to set that now for the framework of a H2 market. And on the other hand, we see the starting of different projects, very I will say practical, to learn more. And as the question of Chile, yes, it's clear how to transport it. Because of this, I said for Northern Africa is much easier because the transportation question is not as high as it is for Chile. And because of this, I think we have to have clear what are the best efficiency use. Then for the question of how to do the transport, as I mentioned before, ammonium as one way, or to do it in a fuel way, but to have clear that we have losses of efficiency in that point. And because of this, I think you have an event such as this evening. And we have to discuss it also in the future to find the best way. But it's clear that there are really a lot of things to do before us to have it clear and to be successful.
Thank you for that, Tanja. There is another question, a little bit more specific concerning the partner countries of the GIZ, especially in Africa. It's a question from Lorenz Kine. You already mentioned Tunisia and Morocco. But he specifically asks, what is about Ghana? Or I would broaden this question maybe a little bit more. Could you elaborate a little bit more on which countries are actually partner countries for the GIZ in that matter?
Well, actually, there are the four countries, as I mentioned, Brazil, South Africa, Morocco, and Tunisia. I know there are discussions going up about further partner countries. There were something like an atlas. The German government was looking where are potentials. And I think there are discussions going on now between the different ministries of the German government, which could be maybe added partner countries. But this is the discussion of and also the decision of the German government. I think that we will have some decisions in the next few months about that, because it's clear and obvious that the discussion of hydrogen and especially climate and energy partnerships will be huge, or there. It's clear that there will be more support for more countries. We have much more partners, energy partnerships, but not all of the energy partnerships are also now going into partnerships for hydrogen. But the discussion is going on, and I'm pretty sure that we see much more countries in the coming years.
So maybe a question connected to that, because there's another colleague asking about India. So maybe again, I would like to broaden this question again. What is actually the criteria you are using to find partner countries, or the criteria? I assume there are more.
Well, first of all, I think it's one of the most or one criteria is, do we have energy partnerships? Then the potential, then the interest of the partner countries, if they are interested in being part of such a partnership, or if they said no, our main issues are on other things and not looking forward to be partner in hydrogen. So it's a question of the discussion with the partner countries. And I see that there is the link to the PTX Atlas from Tobias Block, I think from DENA. There it was a study of where are potentials and for which special issues are there potentials. And on that base, these are also the criteria now for the different ministries in the German government to think about who could be the partner countries.
I see. We are quite at the end of our time. So I'm just looking if there is another question, but I think there are some specific questions on technology, which I would suggest we ask some of our colleagues later who are actually in the business, because I assume they more likely can answer those questions precisely. Tanja, thank you very much for your contribution and for your keynote. We very much appreciate that. And I assume, or I'm very sure, since H2 and Power-to-X are key elements of a global change of energy supply, we will stay in close contact on that matter. And I hope we will have some future events also together on this matter, because I think we are just on a starting point here. Thank you very much for your time and for your contribution, and also for your work. I think the GIZ is a very important tool also for the German politics, especially also German foreign politics and development. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. So let's go on with our other distinguished speakers. I would like to start with another friend from Baden-Württemberg, but don't worry, he also grew out of Baden-Württemberg and is very much in the international business right now. I'm talking about Stefan Liebing. He is a current chairman of the German African Business Association. And as a owner of a company, of a advisory company, you could say, he is very much involved into projects in the fields of energy, infrastructure, and chemicals, and especially into projects in Africa. Before he worked in his current position, he worked for several energy companies such as Energie Baden-Württemberg and Shell. Since 2012, he is, as I said, chairman of the German African Business Association. In 14 and 15, he was also chairing the European Business Council on Africa and the Mediterranean in Brussels. And he's actually an honorary consul of the Republic of Cameroon for the Northern Federal States. So a lot of his career and his work shows that he is a close contact to Africa. Stefan, welcome on our panel and in our event today. Very much appreciated. Energy partnerships in the hydrogen sector provide for countries the opportunity to meet their own energy needs in self-sufficient, affordable, and sustainable way, and also to profit from the import economically, from the export economically. So what is your assessment of the current energy partnerships in the hydrogen sector?
Thank you so much, Ralf and Tanja. Happy to join the group of Baden-Württembergers to speak here this afternoon, and good afternoon, everybody. I would broadly agree to what Tanja has just said, so let me just add a few additional points from a practical perspective. And maybe the good news is what Tanja mentioned, what you mentioned in your introduction, we are working on it already. German private sector is working on it, and there's a lot happening at the moment. In fact, 2018 and 19 have been record years of German investment on the African continent. Then, of course, came Corona, but we all believe, and we are quite convinced, that hydrogen and the generation of hydrogen-based products is going to be the next big thing for German, African, or maybe even European African relations. Before I go into some projects that I'm aware of and some project requirements, let me just make one point again that I think is very important, because in Berlin I sometimes still hear that debate. We do need a lot of imported green energy in order to achieve the objectives also the new government has set. At the moment, we import about 2/3 of our overall energy needs. And since they are imports, they are mainly in the form of fossil energy carriers, such as oil, gas, lignite, whatever it is. If you want to go completely green, I'd say even optimistic studies expect we would need to build another 5, 6, 7 times green energy generation capacity in country if we want to meet that domestically. And I think everybody fully understands, and there's hardly any expert who would disagree, this cannot only be met by local additional generation capacity, but needs to come from some import of green energy, and anything that is based on hydrogen, the so-called derivative products, is going to be an important part of the solution. Now, if you look at where this can come from, anyone who's been involved in oil or gas trading before knows that also for conventional fossil oil, Germany is not so much supplied from Australia or from Saudi Arabia, because there's markets that are closer to these producers. And in return, if we look at where oil to Germany comes from at the moment, we are talking about Russia, North Sea, Europe, North Africa. So destinations that are close by Europe and not too distant away, so that transport costs could be optimized, play an important role today. And that is going to be the case also for the import of green energy. So it's good that we talk to Australia and Middle East and others, but in the end, I believe that just for geographic vicinity, Africa, including some of the southern European countries, but certainly Africa is going to be an important part of the solution that we cannot miss. There's 2 more criteria if we want to select the countries. I'm aware we have this Jülich Atlas that has looked at an analysis of where to best invest, but in the end it's very simple. If we want to operate electrolysis plants, we need green electricity, ideally 24/7. If we can just operate them during day, when you have good solar energy, it's just going to cost double as much as if you could do 24/7. So we need countries that offer both good solar radiation and great wind potential. If we look at where that is the case in Africa, we'll end up very easily at South Africa, Namibia, partly Angola, and it goes on Mauritania, Morocco, and then a few places in North Africa as well. All of these countries, that's the good news, have coast access. They got port and sometimes even export infrastructure in place. Sometimes that needs to be built. And from that, of course, there is access to seawater, which is an important aspect that has been mentioned in the questions before. So Africa is highly relevant, and we even know, I think in German industry, we know what are the countries to focus on at the moment. So I can say there's a lot of projects going on already. And we are going to hear about some of them from following speakers. We have German activities in South Africa, producing green hydrogen for local application, chemical industry, fertilizer as off-takers, for export of green ammonia. We do talk about an eFuels project that German investors are looking at in cooperation with Sasol. They're going to speak later on. Namibia, the government has done a first award of a huge project that is in the $1 billion area, in which also a German participant in a consortium has been able to win. We are looking forward to next rounds, and I think my good friend James, who's going to speak later, will talk about Namibia. My own business has done something in Angola, signing an agreement with Sonangol just a few days ago, where we are possibly going to use hydropower, green hydropower that is available 24/7. And there's other players that are active in that sector. So German industry is working on it. Now, there's still a few things that we need to sort out. First of all, in any infrastructure project in Africa, the key bottleneck always has been finance. Now, the fact that we can, for the first time, export some of these green products to international credit-worthy off-takers will make it a lot easier for European German banks that are under all sort of regulation, Basel, etc., to invest in such projects, because we are talking about billions of loans from international financiers that are needed to make these projects happen. So the first thing is financing is going to be much easier. And that, I think, is a great advantage for local electrification as well. Many of the projects I'm aware that we're looking at solar plants in Africa so far, in many cases, didn't get realized because it was difficult to mobilize that financing from European and German banks, because the off-takers, the local off-takers, energy utilities usually were not strong enough to guarantee for the next 10 or 20 years to always pay for the electricity bill of such investments. And that might be different now that we have a significant share of export. And I think if we are clever, we can work with our friends in Africa to combine and to have maybe 10 or 20% of the electricity generated for local sale and local use. And this international financing structure is going to make it much easier for these things to happen. So there is local benefit just from that aspect. However, financing is still a problem. I have been talking to a lot of banks recently about hydrogen projects in Africa, and obviously it's not proven technology. If you look at the world's largest hydrogen electrolysis plants in operation, we are talking about 10, 20, 30 megawatts. Whereas for the big projects in Africa, we might be talking about a gigawatt scale in the midterm. So many banks are still hesitant and conservative because they believe it's not sure enough, it's not proven enough that this technology is going to work and operate well as it is expected in that scale and size. So that is something where the German government might need to come in to help with guarantees for these type of loans from commercial banks. Something that I believe is very, very good is something that the Ministry of Economic Affairs has done in setting up this H2 Global instrument. For those who don't know it, it's worth Googling it. What I can say is it's going to be an off-take entity funded or co-funded by the German government that will hand out long-term 10 years plus off-take contracts for green hydrogen-based products produced internationally. And just these off-take contracts, the German government backing of these contracts to sell the product at a defined price is going to make a lot of these projects doable. So I think that is exactly the right thing that we need to get this started. What we also need is a different level of political support. If I still have 1 or 2 minutes, let me just mention that. We need what I would call a focus on hydrogen in foreign policy and in foreign affairs activities of the German government, because we are in competition with countries that make this a matter of political government-to-government cooperation. So with whatever, China showing up in Africa, with Brazil showing up in Africa, with North America showing up in Africa, who want to be involved in these projects, hydrogen generation, access to these sites, access to cooperation with local governments is going to be subject to wider political packages. And we need to make sure that having a bit of a disadvantage with the size of German investors, these are usually Mittelstand, smaller players, compared to some of these state-owned conglomerates from abroad. And if we want to be in a position to compete with these players, we need very strong government backing and government activity when it comes to creating bilateral hydrogen partnerships. And maybe we should use as a criteria and select the countries where it's most promising commercially, because if we can't produce electricity at a price that works in the world market, we can have as many energy partnerships as we want. It's not going to happen. So with this, let me just close here. I'm sure there's a lot we can discuss. What I want to say is German industry is working on it. We are quite advanced. I think we even have a competitive advantage to some other countries' private sector, but we will need to coordinate a bit better with the new government so that we can make this a real success story, and then also help Africa. We believe that the project that is being discussed in Namibia has the potential to almost double German investment on the African continent in just one project. So there is a lot we can achieve together. Thanks for listening, and I hope I could add a few additional thoughts to what Tanya just said. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Of course, there are some questions actually pouring in, since you are basically an overall expert concerning Africa. So you view many countries in Africa. I would just place one question from Florian Rohr before we come then to the other speakers. And of course, later on, there is more possibilities to step in also for you on other questions. The question is, the majority of African countries have very poor worldwide governance indicators. That is the thesis from Mr. Rohr. For example, countries like Mauritania and Somalia and others suffer from a very grey own electricity generation, such as South Africa and Namibia. The question now is how to overcome these facts and provide the basis for investors who need to spend billions.
I mean, here, I think this is two questions. One is, what do we do with governments that we consider not to be stable enough, that don't offer the right framework in terms of legal security, maybe even security for our people, etc. Now, this is a general problem that you have in various African countries, and I think if we have 5 or 6 countries that could work as destinations on the continent, there is also going to be a bit of a competition. Speaking to German investors and telling them that they could go to Mauritania or to South Africa, maybe they're going to prioritize in line with compliance issues, with the sort of bankability of certain countries, with country risk in general, security risk, etc. So I personally believe that from successful investment projects, the framework is going to get better step by step. And there is competition that will also force certain governments to offer better conditions, because in the end, their people are pressing, and we see in some countries how much young people are pressing in Africa for more jobs and growth after the Corona crisis. So I'm a bit nervous complaining too much about foreign governments. I always think we should start with what we have. We should sit down and explain what we need, and then we should go for initial projects, and they're going to help improving some of the problems. And I'm sure our colleagues from Africa will give us their view in a minute. The second piece is the question of local dirty generation. And to be honest, I don't think there is so much of a competition, because as I said before, in many countries in Africa, so far it was very difficult to attract investment in clean energy because the financing didn't work, because the country risk was too high, because off-takers were not credit-worthy enough. So let's do these projects that are mainly targeting export, but that will still enable a certain share of local energy supplies, and that will give the government revenues that will make them more credit-worthy also for local electrification projects. And if you ask me, maybe we need more government support for private investors for domestic projects, domestic supplies. If we could have an H2 global type of guarantee fund to guarantee for electricity bills for local supply, I think that would help a lot more, but that can be regarded, I'd say, almost separate from these export type of projects.
Thank you very much, Stefan, for that, and thank you very much for your contributions so far. We will see if there are more questions later on, and I would invite you just to stay on with us. I would like to bring in now our next speaker, the scientist in the group, so to speak, Jochen Barth. He is Division Director, Energy Process Technology at the Fraunhofer Institute for Energy Economics and Energy System Technology. He at least is partly connected to Baden-Württemberg because he studied in Karlsruhe at the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. And he is at Fraunhofer since 2009, and he took over there as head of the department for the energy conversion and storage. And since 2014, he's heading the newly found division for energy process technology. Welcome, a warm welcome to you, Mr. Barth. We are looking forward to your input, especially since you have produced a study on different regions in the world, a atlas, so to speak, about potentials on eFuels worldwide. Please, Mr. Barth, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ralf, for your introduction. I'm starting to share my slides here. I hope you can see them. So in the next couple of minutes, with a handful of slides, I want to inform you about the tool that we have developed, the PTX Atlas, that was already mentioned in the chat, the link to it. Fraunhofer IEE, Energy Economics and Energy Systems Technology, is more than 30 years old, and we have been working on energy scenarios for decades. And the project or the tool that I'm showing you from this project has been a result of many previous activities, and I'm going to explain it in a moment. Now, the energy scenarios that we look at are typically for 2050, nowadays 2045. The middle column shows the final energy demand as we see it in Germany in 2050. So you have heat, electricity, and fuels basically as a contribution. You have on the left-hand side the contributions from biomass and from environmental heat that feeds into these sectors. On the right-hand side here, you see how much of the electricity demand can be produced within the country. That's around 50%, so 900 terawatt hours. And the rest of it, the other 880 terawatt hours that we see here, needs to be imported in the form of hydrogen. That's about 1/3 of the imports, and 2/3 of it is PTL products, or mostly eFuels for road and rail traffic, but as well as air and sea transport. So that's the big picture that we are focusing, that we are looking at for 2050 in the country. We have been working intensely with the European Commission over the last year. They are currently producing a new scenario for Europe, and the picture is pretty much the same. There is a lot of import demand, and 2/3 of the hydrogen will go into power to liquids and non-energetic consumptions. 1/3 will be used directly. So it's a very similar proportion for the whole of Europe. Of course, looking from the German perspective, some of these terawatt hours will be imported from Europe, from Southern Europe, from countries with export potentials, but also from Northern African countries by a pipeline. But there is a huge amount of PTX products to be imported from further away. And that is why this tool has been developed. It's a side product of this project here, DevCopsys, which was funded by the Ministry for the Environment in order to look into import options for eFuels and PTX products and how that would impact our own energy scenario for the country. So this product is a web GIS, geographical information system, that you all can access freely. You see the link here, but the link was already also in the chat. The fuels that are investigated or that you can actually analyze with the tool are Fischer-Tropsch diesel and kerosene, methanol, methane, that's synthetic natural gas, and hydrogen. And the analysis of the resources looks into land availability, weather conditions, local water availability. Here it looks at coastal sites where you do seawater desalination, or inland sites which have access to surface water. It excludes regions that are under nature conservation. It also has socioeconomic aspects, investment security, and finally also calculates the transportation cost of the product of choice to Central Europe. So what you can find when you use the tool, the areas that could be considered for PTX under those headlines that I just presented, meaning a PV or wind resource, access to water and so forth. So there are some constraints in contrast to some other tools that have already been mentioned. And you can identify the full load hours. You can identify possible generation quantities for PTX products by country, the respective production cost for the various PTX energy sources. So for example, wind only locations, or solar only locations, or hybrid locations that combine PV and wind. You can choose from what the Atlas offers you, and then you can also see the cost for transportation to Europe for the different products. Now the website as such is in German. That was a German funded project. But most of the browsers you can switch to automatic translation, so most people will be able to see this in their own language if they choose so. At least English and French should normally be available from the browsers. And as we are speaking, the colleagues who have developed the Atlas itself are sitting together with the ministry people in a kickoff for the follow-up project. So there will be further details be addressed in the next generation. For example, ammonia will be added to the list of products, and also the national demand in each of the countries will also be calculated in the next generation of the Atlas, and also other languages will be made available. Now, which areas have we identified? On the left-hand side, you see a map. The darker blue colors show the available land for PTX production. So the darker the color, the more area is available. And translating that into numbers, on the right-hand side, you see that the top 10 countries here have very substantial areas, which in total already cover 80% of the global PTX resource that has been identified under this exercise. So starting with the US, Australia, those countries were mentioned before, but also Argentina and Russia, countries with large areas for PV and wind implementation. Egypt, Canada, Mexico, Libya, Chile, Saudi Arabia. And then you see the yellow dots here, which show the result of the socio-economic potential that has been calculated for these countries. And there's 4 or 5 different factors going into this. The aspects of governance were already addressed, so it has something to do with the economics in the country, with the renewable energy implementation strategies, with the distance also to Central Europe and other factors. All this background information that you might want to see here is all covered on the website, so you can find the parameters and the assumptions that go into these calculations on the website. So what are the production costs? Now on the left-hand side, you see a range of cost for coastal sites, including seawater desalination, for PV, that's the orange color, for pure wind sites, and for hybrid sites combining wind and PV. On the right part of the graph here, you see the same cost spread for PV and wind and hybrid for inland sites using fresh water. In general, you do not see a big cost difference. Typically, seawater desalination has only maybe 1% or so of the product cost. That's not a cost driver in itself, but we can come back to that in the question round maybe later on in the discussion. On the right-hand side, you see the distribution of production cost across all sites that were investigated. There were more than 600 sites, reference sites for which calculations were made, and the costs were established for these sites. And what you can see here is that the lowest cost products you find in the best wind sites in the world, which have capacity factors in excess of 50%. The next is the medium gray color here is the hybrid sites. And on top you find the pure PV sites, which show lower cost of electricity, but also lower full load hours, of course. So there's a whole spread of cost that you can find. It's not like PTX cost international is so and so much. It really depends on the site and full load hours that you can achieve and what kind of resource you have available. There is some figures here which I have also copied into this slide. The total capacity, the total potential that has been determined here for liquid hydrogen is around 70,000 terawatt hours. Translated into fuels, that's 57,000 terawatt hours. And the share that my colleagues have calculated in a breakdown, an international breakdown, how much would that mean for each country, is 640 terawatt hours. If you compare that to my very first slide or the second slide with this energy scenario, the demand for import is 500 terawatt hours in such a scenario. So there is a little more available than we would probably need in the long term. And with that, I'm through, and I'm looking forward to a good discussion with you. And thank you very much for your attention so far.
Yeah, very interesting, Jochen. Thank you very much for this short overview. I think this study is really fitting perfect to our event, but also it's a very good tool to just get an overview where fuels and hydrogen can and should be produced and where the potentials and possibilities are. I would love to ask you one question, but later in the Q&A session, if I may, because our other guests have, at least parts of them have some time constraints. But the question would be around the discussion we had already with Tanja Gönner on the efficiency. And the question is, how far we should go in Europe with this efficiency approach, so to speak, to limit certain amounts of fuels or hydrogen to certain use cases, and how this is affecting actually the real uptake and development of production. That would be very interesting to me if you could come to that later on a little bit.
Okay, good.
I would like to welcome now our guests from abroad, representing governments. In the first case, James Newpay. He's from Namibia. He's the economic advisor to the President of the Republic of Namibia. And in the same time, he's Namibia's Green Hydrogen Commissioner. James, very welcome in our event. We are more than happy that you are with us and share your view with us. You have actually a huge professional background in real business, asset management, wealth management, financing. You graduated from the University of Namibia and Rhodes University in South Africa. And after quite a long-standing career in the private sector since September 2020, you are appointed as Namibian President Haig Geingob's economic advisor, and soon thereafter, Namibia's Green Hydrogen Commissioner. And of course, it's very interesting to hear from your perspective what actually is the approach of your country to become one of the key players in the global green hydrogen market. James, please, the floor is yours.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Rolf. And thanks for having me on this really great platform I've been following for quite a bit. So congratulations to eFuel for bringing us all together. So, I think sort of my primary mission today was to share with you where we are with the development of our green hydrogen ambitions here in Namibia. And perhaps just to give you some context, at the moment, Namibia is a net importer of electricity. We import about 70% of our electricity, especially during the dry season, or not even dry season, during drought years. And we import about 40% from South Africa, right? And they will give us coal-fired power. So for us to have ambitions to become net energy exporters is really looking to change sort of our particular economy quite fundamentally. At the moment, we have issued an RFP globally last year. We received about 9 proposals from 6 different developers to build a green hydrogen asset in Namibia. The concession is of 2 blocks of about 5,700 square kilometers, which is quite large. Namibia is about 820,000 square kilometers being shared by 2.5 million people. So there's lots of space in Namibia. We're the second least densely populated country in the world. And that plays to our advantage, especially with PTX developments. So where we are now is the winning developer was called Hyphen. And Hyphen has, Nicholas Holdings, which is a South African sort of British-based company. But the brains of that whole operation is really Enertrag, which obviously are a German outfit, a German player, and hopefully you're fairly familiar with them. And we're very excited about working with them. So the first half of this year would be concentrating on finalizing the negotiations with Hyphen, just so that they can start their feasibility. I saw some of the previous slides from Jochen was talking about what is the potential economic impact for countries in emerging markets when we want to develop these things. The asset we're looking to develop is about a $9.4 billion asset. Namibia's GDP is about $11 billion, right? So it gives you a pretty good idea of the scale of this for us economically. But also, our geopolitical stance in the world is going to change dramatically. Just, instead of being a net importer of electricity, we could become a net exporter of energy, both in the form of molecules and electrons into the Southern African power pool. But of course, we're looking to export molecules to Germany as well. And so to give you an idea of how far have we gone with that work, we've signed an MOU with the Port of Rotterdam to help us with the development of the port. We've signed an MOU with the Belgians as well, because one of the Belgians' biggest shipping companies would love to come and build a large bulk liquid bulk terminal at the port here. So CMB are joint venturing with a local company called Old Haven List. Of course, as many of you know, Namibia has quite a deep German heritage. And then, of course, we've signed an MOU with Germany as well. So with the Ministry of Education and Research, BMBF, we've worked very closely with Stefan Kaufmann. And in fact, this year, hopefully by next month already, we want to launch a program with BMBF where we'll be availing grant funding to build 2 pilot plants in Namibia. We're very excited about that. There'll be about 30 million euros that will be availed for that particular endeavor. And I think that'll be just a fundamentally very exciting thing for Namibia when they start seeing green hydrogen assets actually being developed in country. I think some of the more exciting news as well is we've started, early conversations with BMWK. I'd love to congratulate the the German nation for really bringing climate and economy together. I think it's a really great vision for the rest of the world, because it really does underscore just how important the energy transition is from an economic perspective. And so, Minister Habeck's ministry has reached out to us, and possibly we might be able to finalize an MOU with them as well. That'll be fantastic. If possible, Namibia would love to work with Germany on the H2 Global platform as well. And so we'll see how that conversation goes. But in terms of Hyphen and where they are, I was actually going to try and see whether I might actually share my screen, but it's fine. I won't do that. But essentially, actually, I will do that, because what I did want to show you, and let that start just now, is I wanted to show you what we were looking at. And Ralph, just confirm, you can see my screen here, right?
Not yet. I can
yet?
see a screen, but there is nothing on it actually.
Oh, really?
Only a white screen.
It's only a white screen, right?
Is it only a white screen? Okay, that's fine. Maybe I'll stop sharing and I'll try again. But essentially what I wanted to show you was the map of the Speergebied National Park, right? So we've given out the concession for the top 2 blocks in that particular Speergebied, but we still have 20,000 square kilometers in the Speergebied that we would like to issue in future RFPs. And what we're now doing, actually working together with Hyphen, is we're looking to develop what we're calling the green hydrogen master plan for that area, right? We want to put out an RFP, and everyone wants to build their own transmission lines or their own pipelines or their own desalination plants, because obviously that would really sort of massively impact that national park from a flora and fauna and an environmental perspective. So we're developing a master plan to say, if that's the length of the park, we would like to potentially have just 2 desalination plants, one in the north, one in the south. We'd like to have one pipeline that can take molecules into South Africa, one pipeline, for example, 2 pipelines for the desalination plants, and then 2 areas where we'll develop the transmission lines, one going into Namibia, the other one possibly going into South Africa. And so the reason I'm mentioning that is now, obviously, one of the more complicated things is developing common user infrastructure. So the pipelines, the transmission lines, and the and the port will all be common user infrastructure that may very well be developed by the government and the first developer. But of course, it will be setting up other developers down the line to come in, either take part ownership of that particular common shared infrastructure, ETC. And so the Namibian government is busy engaging, some of the best lawyers around the world. We're working with the African Legal Support Facility to make sure we get very strong legal backing to work with the developer to enter into progressive contracts that will allow future developers to really unearth the full potential of that Speergebied National Park to provide the world with renewable energy and molecules. So all in all, that is, quite a, conversation that's focused on the green hydrogen. I think just very briefly on the other side, the real focus as well is on, look, if you're going to build a 2 gigawatt project and the whole country's generation capacity is 650 megs, and we import, almost 400 megawatt worth of power, or at least assets, could we not actually offtake some power from the actual project, right? And that's one of the interesting things as well that we're doing, is we're talking to Hyphen to say, could we not be given a specific allocation in terms of the terawatt or the gigawatt hours that could get developed there? And then we could use that obviously to then solve for our own national power security instead of importing power from South Africa first. So that would be the first step. And then of course, the second step could very well be exporting power to South Africa and Zambia. And I think that energy security, energy self-sufficiency, clean energy transition, while you're creating a lot of jobs for Namibia and solving for our current account deficit, because of course at the moment we're net importers of power and goods from South Africa, that's a real big story in terms of really changing the Namibian country and the Namibian economic system over the long haul. And I know it's an important thing as well for our German partners, where they don't just want to be seen as they're coming here to get green hydrogen molecules. They also want to contribute to the development and the industrialization of a country such as Namibia. So we're very excited for that. And we look forward to working with all of you. And I've already had very good discussions and meetings with Stefan Liebing when we visited the Africa Verein last year, and we really look forward to taking that conversation to another level this year. And hopefully with Fraunhofer as well through BMBF. I'd really love for that tool that Jochen shared to start incorporating the Namibian reality and the Namibian potential as well. And so we look forward to working with him closely as well. Ralph, perhaps let me stop there and allow you an opportunity to ask some questions, and so we can engage with your guests. Thanks a lot for having me.
Thank you very much, James. That was actually very impressive and answering a lot of questions I had in my mind already. My question to you is, because I heard you must go in a certain time, but the question is, are you in our call until 6? Because then we also can ask some more questions later on after the next two speakers presented their presentation.
I'm very happy to hang around.
Okay.
I am at the president's farm where we were working together on a few things, but I took leave to attend this. So I'll hang around for a bit, and hopefully I can take some questions later as well. No problem.
President's farm in Namibia sounds anyway promising. So thank you very much for that.
You should come over sometime.
I definitely have to, actually. Yeah, that's true. Not me, actually. That I think this invitation is extended to all our participants today. That is actually one of the reasons why we do this, just to learn from the developments in countries all over the world, and especially in this, of course, with Namibia, where we actually have, as Germans, of course, a closer contact and binding simply due to the past we also share, and which is discussed quite often. I will come to that maybe later on in a question. I would pass over now to your neighbor country, actually, South Africa. We have Janita Naidoo with us. She's Vice President Business Development of Sasol in South Africa. She's a chemical engineer by profession, and she worked 25 years in the oil, gas, energy, and petrochemical industry. So she very much knows what she's talking about when it comes to concrete production and production plans and all those processes involved there. She joined Sasol 1997 and has served there in several various positions. And since 2022, so that's very recent, I learn, she is Vice President for Business Development. Janita, a very warm welcome. We heard a little bit about South Africa already from James. Sasol is supporting the goal of South Africa's government to achieve net zero emissions by 2050 and is committed to the acceleration of renewables deployment and the development of the green hydrogen economy. So the simple question would be, could you lay out why and how exactly is Sasol supporting these goals? The floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Ralph. Good day to all, and thank you for this opportunity. I've got a few slides that Anya will help present, please. Thank you. Thank you, Anya. You can move to the next slide. Okay, so firstly, maybe a brief overview of Sasol, the company that I represent today. Sasol is over 70 years old. It's an integrated energy and chemicals company headquartered out in South Africa. So I'm based in Johannesburg, and I don't have as elegant location as James just shared of being on the president's farm, but I am working remotely from home currently in Johannesburg. And the company is really South African headquartered, but with a significant global presence. We are a 11.5 billion euro turnover company with approximately 8 billion euro market cap. We listed both on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange as well as the New York Stock Exchange, and we have 29,000 employees in 27 countries. I think the The start of this company was really built on coal. So we still have very significant operations in South Africa based on coal to produce liquid fuels and chemicals, both for our local market as well as export markets. And I think what's key is we have been shifting our feedstock to natural gas and have partial feed of natural gas from Mozambique. But we've also now put out a stated purpose to address sustainability, but also create shared value. And I think what's key perhaps is just in terms of value shared, we create significantly to the South African economy by way of taxes. So the government is quite a key stakeholder in our business. We also have various benefits to employees. So we have a significant employee pool. So again, job creation is quite critical to us as an organization. And social investment. So we really also invest in our communities in which we operate. R&D and skills development is also a big part of Sasol and its values. And maybe I just want to also touch a bit on what James also shared, I think it was Stefan, who shared a bit about the values and the ethics of organizations, particularly coming out of Africa. And I just want to reassure the audience that as Sasol, we are, we are a company that values integrity and, anti-bribery and corruption, and the ethics requirements of ourselves and stakeholders is quite important to us. The next slide, please. Thank you. I think, again, Sasol has put forward a transitionary path to our net zero ambition by 2050. And because we have a significant footprint in South Africa and in a country which has is primarily based on coal, we will contribute to South Africa's international climate change commitments. And the country and Sasol's transition to a low carbon future, we believe, would require bold innovation and investment in transformative technologies to facilitate a just transition to a lower carbon economy by creating new employment opportunities, continued focus on localization, human capital planning for a low carbon future, to build fit for purpose a future capability, and continued support of socio-economic value creation in host communities. So we are very aligned with the understanding that we need to get to net zero, but we're going to do it in a transitionary manner. I think also highlighted by Tanya earlier on is that South Africa is endowed with exceptional renewable energy resources, making the country ideal for green hydrogen production. Next slide, please. The three businesses that we are structured along is an energy business. Our energy business is leading the transition in Southern Africa. And our plan is to decarbonize our existing operations. And I'll share a bit of one of the opportunities we're driving to make sustainable aviation fuel with biomass as a feedstock in conjunction with a LEN consortium, Linda, Enitrach, and Navitas, together with Sasol. And we are engaging on the H2 Global platform in terms of that opportunity and aligning it with the EU RED II legislation. I'll share a bit more on that later. On the grow new value pools, the energy business is also driving opportunities in the Northern Cape province of South Africa. And that in particular is the Buchobai Green Hydrogen Project And again, I'll talk to that a bit later and just share some of the great work that's really been co-created together with political support from the German government, the South African government, and Sasol, and key partnerships that we are forming in this space. The chemicals business is, again, very much a global business. We've got a presence in Germany, in Marl, in Brunsbüttel, as well as Italy. And we've got a presence in the United States and in China. Our aim is to get our United States business to full potential in this financial year. And we also positioning this business to continually innovate with our customers to extract value in specialty chemicals and sustainable solutions for the future. Our third business pillar is Sasol EcoFT. It's the business that I am also a part of currently, newly appointed as Vice President, as was shared earlier. And here we are driving sustainable aviation fuel with our primary focus on international opportunities. And we've got some 27 opportunities in our funnel across much of Europe, also looking at opportunities in the United States, in Canada, in the Middle East, and in India. Next slide, please. And then maybe this is the final slide, but I'll just spend some time on this slide. So really our value proposition in terms of e-fuels and the hydrogen economy, as well as Power to X, is positioned around our Fischer-Tropsch synthesis competitive advantage that we have as an organization. And the benefit that we bring is our FT process is relatively mature, with one reactor already able to scale to 15,000 barrel per day to a 20,000 barrel per day in a single reactor. So that really is one of our market leadership value propositions that we bring. We also have our 70 years plus of FT innovation and operations. So our coal to liquids in Secunda, that is some 50 years old, really uses Fischer-Tropsch synthesis, and that we now offering with multiple feedstocks at the front end. So we're really saying we can have a biomass feed going into gasification, producing the carbon that will then go into the FT process, into a refining process to produce jet fuel, diesel, naphtha, and chemicals. Maybe on the slide, I'll just speak a bit about the opportunities that I mentioned. So we currently have an opportunity where we're feeding biomass into our existing gasifiers, and we already have the existing infrastructure in terms of the back-end process. And so this is really to make sustainable aviation fuel, but this is co-feed with coal. So we are saying we will add biomass and make sustainable aviation fuel. And in terms of the EU RED II green accounting principles and flexible allocation of those green molecules to the sustainable aviation fuel used in the EU, we need to align in terms of those principles. The product will be manufactured in South Africa, and the issue to overcome is sustainable aviation fuel blended into an airplane leaving out of the Johannesburg OR Tambo International Airport, destined for an aviation hub like Frankfurt. How would that mechanism work in terms of having some sort of a book and claim system that allows for that fuel to get the recognition as per the EU RED II principle. I think the second issue or the second area that we're looking at is the current threshold. I think there was a question earlier on in the session that spoke about EU RED 2 and how would we align coal-based operations that need to transition to a lower carbon footprint. How would those thresholds be looked at relative to the current EU thresholds stipulated, which is the 28 gram CO2 equivalent per megajoule. So I think that's another area of alignment. And thirdly, the H2 Global platform also has a volume limitation. And the benefit that this project has is we can build this at scale already because the infrastructure is already in the ground. We need to put in renewable energy and electrolysis technology to really make sustainable aviation fuel. And we can already do a project at a reasonable size to also get the benefit of economy of scale. So I think just in terms of understanding again what capacity for offtake of SAF in terms of the existing platform would allow for a project of this scale to realize. Maybe on the Boegoebaai hydrogen opportunity, which is really looking at this pathway, the renewable energy electrolysis to hydrogen. This is a new greenfields opportunity, and Sasol will be the anchor developer of this planned Boegoebaai Green Hydrogen Special Economic Zone. It's based in the Northern Cape province of South Africa. And this project, through coordination by the South African Presidency, Sasol, the Northern Cape Provincial Government, and the Gauteng Provincial Government, with the Northern Cape Government and the Port of Rotterdam in the Netherlands, acting as demand aggregator for the green hydrogen into Europe. The Boegoebaai project is one such green hydrogen, ammonia, and power-to-X opportunity under investigation. Sasol currently is a major manufacturer of grey hydrogen in South Africa, producing approximately 2.5 million tons per annum for the domestic market. So we already have a good footprint from which to leverage, although obviously we need to transition to green hydrogen. Sasol, as the lead project integrator, will bring together strategic partners along the value chain and other enabling role players, including potential customers, funders, investors, technology suppliers, and renewable energy providers.
Great.
I think we're really delighted with the progress made. The Presidency and the German Development Agency, the GIZ, are working together to develop South Africa's green hydrogen strategy. 40 million euros in grant funding has been committed by the German Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, the BMZ, with 12.5 million euros committed to H2SA, which will assess the potential for green hydrogen production in a number of locations, including Boegoebaai.
Thank you very much, Anita. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you, but I have to look a little bit on the time.
Oh, sorry.
I'm very sorry about that, but I have one question for you later on as well. So my suggestion will be, we bring in now our last speaker, Clara Bowman. So we go quickly around the globe and go to Chile, because Clara is representing the Haru Oni project in Chile. And she's representing as general manager HIF Global, which is actually a member of the eFuel Alliance as well. She has a long-standing experience in infrastructure projects, especially in Latin America. And we are very happy to have you here. It's around midday right now in Chile, I think. So I hope you had something for lunch in the meanwhile. And I would suggest, Clara, please, you have the floor. Maybe you just tell us a little bit about Haru Oni and what is behind that and what is going on there in Chile.
Well, thank you very much, Ralph. And I will try to be brief with an eye on the time so that we have some time for a panel discussion if possible. I'm here to talk about Chile. I think that we saw, was it in Joachim's presentation, that Chile is one of the best places in the world to produce e-fuels. In particular, the areas which have very, very high load factor in the south of Chile, which you can see circled here on this map. It's easy to focus on renewable resource, but beyond that, another component which is extremely important, which is also touched on by some of the other panelists, is the ability to get large amounts of finance liquidity available to be able to produce these very large-scale projects. And that's something else that Chile has, which is an extremely important factor. Chile is a country that has been open for decades now to project finance. It regularly closes financings that are over $1 billion or several $billion. And so it's really a great place to be able to develop these very high capital intensive projects depending on extremely high quality renewable energy. So on both sides, Chile is a fantastic place to be developing these projects. Some of the other things that were mentioned by the other panelists is the transport. Actually, when we're talking about e-fuels instead of hydrogen, the transport is not such a relevant consideration. If we look at transport from Chile as opposed to transport from other places, it's a very small component, less than 5% of the overall cost structure for a large-scale project. And so we don't see that as being a significant disadvantage for Chile in the e-fuels in the e-fuels department. Obviously, for hydrogen, the more transport that you have, then that's certainly a penalty. Chile has awoken to the potential that green hydrogen and its derivatives, e-fuels, have for its economy. Chile is one of the largest copper producers in the world, so it benefits also from the development of battery technologies and e-mobility. But they view that the export of green hydrogen could rival copper as being one of the largest industries in the country, and that's something which is a multi-sector view that's shared by pretty much all sides of politics. As we see a new presidential administration coming in, we've certainly had signals from them already that they continue to support the development of this important industry for Chile. And so we, as a company, are dedicated to the production of e-fuels. We're not focused only in Chile. We also have developments in the United States and in Australia and New Zealand that we're working on. However, I'd like to focus a little bit on our most advanced development, which is the Haruoni plant, which is actually a plant that's in construction as we speak, and we hope to be producing the first liters of e-fuel later this year. This is the first fully integrated plant of its type in the world. So we go straight from the electricity production to the production of gasoline, methanol, and what we call ELG, which I guess could also be thought of as ELPG, liquid petroleum gas, which will come from this plant. So it's a small scale version of what we hope to do on a much larger scale over the coming years as we start to develop these commercial scale projects. And I know that the theme of the session today is international cooperation, and you can certainly see that that is the case with the Haruoni project. If we look at the main project sponsors, we have HIF, we're an international company with capital from Chile, but also from the United States. We have Porsche, the very well-known German company, and Green Power from Italy, Siemens Energy also from Germany, ENAP and Gasco. Some of our important providers come from China, from the United States, from Germany as well. So we really have a wide variety of countries around the world collaborating to be able to make this project happen. We also have a very good example of the cooperation between governments. We have around about $10 million of government funding from the German BWMI ministry. And this was done in the framework of a collaboration between the German government and the Chilean government for just these sorts of projects to be able to continue to develop e-fuels and the links between Chile and Germany with regard to the export of e-fuels. And finally, not to leave aside our larger plans beyond what is our initial demonstration facility, we're planning to develop 6 phases of around 12,000 barrels per day in Chile, starting though with the first phase, which is a little bit smaller of around, well, substantially smaller of 1,000 barrels per day, which will be our first commercial facility. We've been working on the engineering and permitting of that facility, and we hope to start construction next year of that facility, and then to be producing in 2025. We're also working in the very short term on large-scale projects in the United States and in Australia. So we completely share the view that was shared by the other panelists, that eFuels are going to need to be produced in very large scale in multiple jurisdictions, multiple countries, as quickly as possible if we're going to address the climate challenge. And we at HIF Global are trying to do our part towards that. So with that, I will close so that we hopefully have some time for discussion in group.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Clara. So please, if anybody of you has a final question to any of the panelists, please let us know via the chat. Otherwise, I would maybe start with a question to Clara. Could you please elaborate a little bit on the cost side? Because
Sure.
one argument we always hear here in Europe is, of course, it's far too expensive. E-fuels never will be competitive because they are far too expensive. So what is your perspective on that? So, or maybe to put the question a little bit more concrete, when do you think we will be in an area of competitive prices with fossil fuels?
With fossil fuels, well, I'm going to start first with biofuels, because today there is a market for low carbon fuels that exists. There's a market in Europe that's a very dynamic market for low carbon fuels. And we believe that with our first commercial project, which is around about 300 megawatt project or 1,000 barrels per day, that we want to start construction on next year, we will already be competitive with equivalent quality biofuels in the European market. So we think that due to the incredible resource that we have in Chile and the low financing costs, we are able to be competitive even on what I would call a relatively small scale, which is our first commercial project, which is currently in development. For the larger projects, so then we go to the world scale trains, which are around about 10 times the size of the initial commercial project. And so we're talking about 12,000 barrels per day of production. We expect to be extremely competitive with current sources of low carbon fuels. And we think that with the cost reductions that are expected and the increase in efficiency and technological improvements that we can see over the medium term, certainly before we get to the end of the 6 phases in Chile, we should be competitive on a one-to-one basis with fossil fuels, depending, of course, on what the price of those fuels is. The price of fossil fuel is a relative concept. It can be $20 per barrel or $100 per barrel. So at reasonable price of fossil fuels, we think that we can be competitive in the medium term.
Of course, depends very much, for example, on energy taxation in Europe. If fossil fuels are, or if e-fuels are taxed the same way like fossil fuels as it is right now, then of course it will be difficult. I fully agree to that. There is another question from Felipe Ferrari. Nice projects and ambitions, he says to you. And what is the C source for such molecules?
So for our initial pilot project, we are actually using direct air capture using global thermostat technology. And that's because we think that it's extremely important for the future of e-fuels for us to be qualifying that technology as soon as possible and for us to try and push as quickly as possible for the development of large-scale production of direct air capture technology. We understand, and I think the first speaker commented on it, that current costs of direct air capture are high, but we believe that if you look at what happened in the solar and the wind sectors over a very short period of time in terms of cost reduction, as you start to produce these units at scale in proper manufacturing facilities, and where you're using these units in areas where you have very low energy costs and other kind of atmospheric benefits, that we can bring down the cost of direct air capture to certainly below $150 per ton and perhaps even more aggressive than that in the short to medium term. So we're doing our best to try and impulse that as much as possible. because that could just be a real game changer for eFuels. That's the component that's most important. In the meantime, for our first commercial project, we're not basing that on direct air capture because the technology isn't quite ready yet for that. And so we are using a bio source of CO2 based on waste products that are available here from the forestry industry in Chile.
Great. Thank you very much, Clara. There are some more questions, more specific, I think, to you in the chat. Maybe you can just also look into it and answer them, because I really would like to hand over to Jochen Barth one last time. As I already stated, from his perspective, I mean, clearly it is no news that direct electrification is more efficient than producing e-fuels and using them, for example, for mobility. But from your perspective, also when you see the potentials in the world you were talking about, how far should we actually limit ourselves in Europe regulatory-wise in that respect? Or is it really a problem that renewable energies on a global scale forever will be a good which is to be limited because there is not enough production?
Well, that's a complex question to answer, I'm afraid. But I think when we are talking about efficiency, what that translates into is cost, and we have addressed that before. But it also translates into resources, which means not only materials, but also land and water and so forth. And in our atlas, we have tried to avoid conflicts of interest on the land use side. We have tried to avoid using more water in areas where there is already water shortage. So there are a number of constraints that we have introduced in order to make this a more sustainable approach than, for example, the H2 Atlas, which just looks at the areas regardless of water availability and other things. And I don't believe that's the way forward. So whatever we can produce in a sustainable way, and that is of course a discussion that will never stop, because what we look as at being sustainable, that will change over time. But we are working, I haven't mentioned that in the introduction, but we are working with a lot of people developing projects in Northern African countries. We are advisors to the KfW Bank. We have worked for the GIZ. We are working in Argentina and Chile on different projects. And if you talk to the local people, they say, okay, we do not want that someone builds wind turbines here, builds synthesis plants and then exports everything, and there is no benefit for us, and they even harm our environment. That's not the way that this will work at a large scale. So I think sustainable and social criteria have to be applied to some extent, and that will change over time. So the analysis that we have made shows that if we are carefully using e-fuels for sectors where we do not really have an alternative, or even not in the long term, then there is enough for everybody. If we are going to waste it, and there are scenarios that need twice as much e-fuels than the ones that we are producing, there will not be enough for everyone, at least not if we want to do this in a sustainable way. So I think that's our own decision how we want to design our future. Do we really want to be sustainable and not harm environments of people that live far away, and not harm their lives and their health?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that clearly meets also the goals of the eFuel Alliance, because we also say at the end of the day, it is about all technologies we have to roll out to gain the big goal of being climate neutral or CO2 neutral in 2050. And that's actually the debate, of course, we have in Europe very much. Jochen, thank you very much for this answer. This leads me to James, actually, since he is from Namibia, because in Germany we also have a debate, also partly in Europe, especially coming from maybe more from the left of the political spectrum, saying, okay, now after Europe has a long-standing history of colonization with all the implications we know about, now we start a new kind of energy colonization where the Europeans come, for example, to a country like Namibia, take their energy sources for their needs. And therefore, those people say, so we should not do that as Europeans or as Germans. What is your take on that, being as an African and a Namibian looking on Europe? Oh, I think you are muted, James, sorry. Now, I think.
Great, I'll put on my headphones. Can you hear me now?
There you are, perfect.
Okay, brilliant. So I think a very fantastic question, especially when you want to look at this whole development from a sustainability perspective, aka whatever project you want to build now needs to sort of last through multiple generations, multiple power regimes, etc. The way I view this as a Namibian actually, and as a parent and as somebody who works for the government as well, is the energy resource that we're looking to capture and transform is fairly renewable, and last I checked should last for a few millennia. So I don't think you're taking anything away. If anything, what you're doing is you're going to be preserving the integrity of the whole planet with this energy, right? Because if you use some of Namibia's sun to reduce the carbon signature of another industry in another country, and that reduces emissions globally for everybody, that's great for me and my kid, because when they're growing up, hopefully we can limit global warming to below 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees centigrade. So Namibia would be more than happy to share some of its sun with other places which are struggling with that. But on top of that, if you're going to change the economic complexity of Namibia with this opportunity, and you're going to at the same time increase the energy independence and the energy security of Namibia with that opportunity, I think it's a no-brainer for Namibia, right? Because I just mentioned in my introduction, we're like a net energy importer, and we're importing energy from a fairly fiscally stressed institution in Eskom. And so if you're in Namibia and you're trying to industrialize on that base, I mean, that should make you extremely nervous. And some people would say, well, why have we not done this before? I mean, the first project, we might be able to build 2 or 3 like this in Namibia, maybe even 4. The first project alone is about, like we said, $9.4 billion to get it done. That's 3 times the annual budgeted revenue of our country, right? So we could never do this without the world, without Europe. I think Clara is really fantastic example of what they're doing in Harouni, right? Just shows sort of the global nature of the effort required to problem solve for this. So I think what I would say, Ralph, to the colleagues in Europe who are saying, let's not go and colonize Namibia, I'd say fantastic, let's not do that. But what this would do is it brings Namibia from a country that typically would deal with Germany on the basis of, say, receiving ODA, etc., right, like financial assistance, to bringing it to be an actual almost peer trading partner, right? We will be selling you a product, whether it's fuels or ammonia or sustainable aviation fuel. We will be selling you a product that you desperately needs to meet your own industrialization objectives of a country. And so we start to become real partners versus big brother, small brother, or big sister, small sister type of a situation. So of course we must do so in a way that respects the flora and the fauna of Namibia. That's massively key, and it'll be a big priority for us and any developer that comes to Namibia. But at the same time, we have to respect the people that live in this country. We have a very high level of inequality. I think the second highest in the world if you look at the Gini coefficient. We have very low levels of energy availability in rural areas as well. And of course, we're going through some of the toughest fiscal challenges as a country, right? We're going through the biggest deficit that we've ever seen since independence. And so I think those things are very useful to throw into the mix of the conversation as well, Ralph. Like show the people the full picture, right? And Namibia could absolutely massively benefit from this level of FDI in the industrialization. And we need to work with everybody, whether they're Europeans, Chileans, or even the Japanese have actually started talking to us as well. Okay.
Great. Thank you very much. I don't know, Janita, you want to add something to that from your perspective?
Absolutely. No, I fully support what James has said. I think just from a South African and an African continent perspective, we really hungry for investment. We really want to transition our economy to a low carbon economy. And we welcome any cooperation or partnership in that regard from the global ecosystem to support us in realizing that ambition. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So we are unfortunately running out of time. It's 6:10. Still, less people are in the call, but still 136. So I would like to give Stefan maybe the floor for some last remarks from his side, and then I would hand over to Monika Griefahn for wishing a Happy New Year to everybody and some closing remarks on this event. Stefan, please.
Let me not waste people's time by just saying something. Maybe what is important to note, and thanks to my fellow speakers here, is sometimes German business and German investors in that sector are still a bit afraid of or hesitant of going to what they would consider exotic markets outside of Europe. And I think today has shown us that we have first-class professional business partners, world-class projects in Africa, of course, in Latin America as well. So I can just say it's worth going and looking at these things. It's all realistic, it's serious business, and I'm sure between Africa Fine and eFuel Alliance, we can help anyone who wants to go and do something in these places. So we stand ready to support.
Thank you very much, Stefan. And I can confirm already that this for sure was not the last occasion from the eFuel Alliance in that respect. I think there is a lot more to come, a lot more projects, of course, a lot more areas in the world, and we want to contribute to that as well. Thank you very much. I just want to thank our team, the eFuel Alliance team, for organizing the event, especially Christine Schmidt and Marlene Hermfüsse, who did all the work in advance. Thank you very much for that. And now I would like to hand over to Monika to give her closing remarks. Monika.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think Stefan did already a very good remark, because I think also, as James said, they are hungry and they want to do something. And Janita said that as well. This is something which is really necessary for us to know, so that we don't feel colonization wise or so, because that's what I hear a lot if we work with other countries. So I thank you very much that you opened this perspective and that you really want to cooperate, and that you are good people to cooperate with, which is wonderful. We can only promote this everywhere. And I think one important point, and I saw that in the chat, is also that your countries want to get climate neutral yourself, or zero emission, or whatever you want to call it. And that's very important to do that and to help you to do that, and then do the export. So we need both, I think. We need the capacities for you, but we need also the export, because the cooperation is necessary. As we have at the moment in Europe, 60% of our fuels are imported, or any kind of energy is imported. We will have that in the future as well. We cannot generate that all ourselves. So I see that the cooperation is very much needed. I thank Tanja, Stefan, Jochen, James, Janita, Clara, for all your contributions. I think it was a very, very good afternoon, and it helped me for arguments. And thank you, Ralph, for doing all this preparation and questions. And thank you all the team, of course, as well. And I hope that even there were some critical questions on the side, you got some arguments, and we can continue this discussion. And please come to us and discuss with us. I think we need more people to convince also the politicians in the EU to make the right regulations, so that's possible to do all these investments in your countries. So thank you very much and have a good night and Happy New Year, as Ralf says.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monica, Ralf. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Great initiative, man. Let's keep on doing it. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.